Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of Power Book 3 Raising Kanan Season 2, Episode 7, titled No Love Lost. It's pretty fitting that's the title for this episode because there are some things that I do love about this episode. There's some things I would lose about this episode altogether. It's a really interesting season where I think like some stories are just like surging up in this awesome direction. And then there's some others where I'm just like, why are you guys doing this? You don't need to do this. Everything else is good. Just stay with what works.
That's exactly how I feel. I feel like some characters have these like really good meaty stories like Marvin and Rock and, Jukebox. And then we move over to like Lulu where they don't seem to really know what to do with him. This whole like Toni story that's still going on for what reason? I don't know. But, here we are.
We will get into, of course, all of that. So much more. This was a pretty action-packed episode, and I think there's some pretty interesting consequences that could be coming here for Rock, for Howard, for so many others. But go ahead, hit that subscribe button. We are here after every episode of Raising Kanan, breaking everything down, sharing some theories. Eventually, we will be here for Power Book 2 Ghost whenever that is officially announced as coming back.
Yeah, and if you're new to the channel, I'm Jess. This is Matt. Like he said, we are here every week talking about Raising Kanan. We are also covering House of the Dragon. If you're interested in that, we have that new episode coming up tonight. So hit that subscribe button and follow us over on Instagram, Matt and Jess TV. Where do you want to start? There was a lot of stuff that happened in this episode.
I want to start on the things that I feel like are emotionally the most successful. I want to talk about good things at first because good things make me happy. And you know what made me happy and also very sad at the same time? The entire Jukebox storyline in this episode, I think, was so like beautifully done, well written, well put together, where it's like all of a sudden, she's able to make a connection with Nicole's father, who was always just kind of like, never as bad as, Nicole's mother, who is the absolute worst human possible. But they were able to forge this really interesting connection out of just sort of a happenstance encounter at her grave at the start of the episode.
Yeah, it was really nice to hear him say how happy he was that he knew that his daughter had felt love and was able to love, and that was something that was really important to him out of this whole thing. And that he said, I'll be here for you if you do ever need to reach out. He mentioned the tape. He wanted to sort of have that moment where he could actually see her again. And Jukebox goes and pays for the tape to be fixed and then gives it to him. Her story, both seasons, is just a 10 out of 10. Her story is the story I am the most invested in.
I think a lot of it comes down to the writers really seem to have a very specific focus on, okay, this is who this character is. This is why she goes through some of the stuff that she does. And because we have this very specific endpoint for her, they can kind of play around in the journey of how she gets there. And there is just like so much different layers of tragedy that she deals with. Everything with Marvin and season 1, everything that she's going through this season, even separate from Nicole, there's still a tragedy in the sense that she is trying to be molded into this person who she very clearly is not. And I think it's just this idea of, okay, I'm going to be in my mother's world. I'm going to try to do things that sort of are quote unquote expected, but none of this is Jukebox.
Yeah, it feels very relatable to anybody who, maybe grew up with a single parent and you're having problems with that parent and you go look for the other parent and you're trying to, as a young person, you're still trying to figure out who you are, what you like, what you're all about. And then you're trying to still also have connection with a parent that maybe you don't know that well. And we're watching Jukebox go through that where she's like, okay, things with my dad, they're not great at the moment. Now, here's my mom being like, welcome. But she's kind of feeling like, yeah, welcome, but welcome the way that you are. And I have to make sure that I kind of play the role as best as I can, change my hair, change what, I'm wearing, go out with this guy, whatever makes my mom happy with me. And it's really tough to watch because you can see her really struggling with it. She wants to be who she is, but she's just feeling really insecure about herself after everything that just happened with her dad. She doesn't feel comfortable to be who she is, and she's doing all these things and setting up basically this false sense of who she is so that her mother will be accepting of her. It's really heartbreaking to watch her going through this. She just doesn't seem to know where she can fit in.
And here's the truth. Here's the real talk on all of it. It's going to end badly. Like, there's no other way this is going to end. Like, this is not some like big elaborate theory. We know where her story goes, but it is just sort of like she's going down this road where she's becoming less and less of herself to try to really please this person who fundamentally she doesn't know. Like, there might be a lot of love that, you know, Jukebox's mom does have for her on some level, but there also may be a certain amount of this that is performative. Like, Marvin did his best in what little scene that he had to lay some of this out there. You know, she did leave, and people can change, and very often that can happen in life, but there's nothing that cements here that 100% for sure she's going to be there for Jukebox for the rest of her life.
That scene with Marvin and Jukebox was one of my favorite scenes. Obviously, there's tension still between them. The doors opened a little bit to them talking. They really kind of had a little bit of a conversation here. But one of the things that Marvin said that's very true is that he was just like, listen, like, your mom had you and then just left. And, you know, that's fine that she's come back now. But like, remember that even when it was hard, I was still here. Like, you know, it wasn't that easy for me. It wasn't that easy for you. But you and I stuck it out and we did this thing together kind of thing. And your mom didn't. And it's hard sometimes to really, I guess, sort of focus on that and remember that when you're mad at somebody and you've had this fallout between each other. And Jukebox still doesn't know that her dad has gone through this anger management. He's just graduated from it. You can even see him at the graduation feeling very different, talking to some of the other people, the guy that he, you know, got into it with at the beginning where they're shaking hands and they got into another spot. And the thing that I absolutely loved about this was I was so worried they were going to hook him up with Renee during the class and that they waited until the end of the class. I was so happy for that because there's a really nice connection there, but I wanted to see Marvin make other types of decisions. He's on this good path now. I was like, oh man, are they just gonna hook them up during the class where he's still kind of making bad decisions? And so is this teacher of this course, but they didn't do that. He's on a good path, which now brings us into the Toni story that just won't die, even though she's seemingly dead now. I really hope that this is going to be sort of, she really is actually dead. She looked dead. I feel like she's dead. Please just be dead. Like, I can't deal with this story anymore. It wasn't great in season 1. It's not great now. I was just kind of like, why is she back? And here's my tinfoil hat theory on this. Marvin is getting into a very good place.
Yeah.
Here's this, you know, great woman who's really interested in him. He's feeling really good. We're seeing him smile a lot. He's changed a lot in his life. Things are starting to mend a little bit with Jukebox. It's a road, but, you know, they're both on it. It feels like, what better way to screw up his whole life than to hire somebody to go and kill Toni because he's mad she's off living a good life, and then end up at the end of this season going to jail or facing jail. I think there's going to be something tied to that of where we're going to end up with Marvin.
There's a legitimate chance of this. I think that the show wants to evolve these characters. They don't want to put them in the same position every single season. And, you know, while Marvin may have graduated, which, by the way, Marvin, don't bald shame that man. That man has already had it. You know, we have it enough right now with our baldness. But no, okay. Marvin, he's still got that self-destructive tendency in him. While he may be better when it comes to his anger, he's really not seeing the forest through the trees with Toni. You know, I wish the show would see the forest through the trees with Toni and realize, you know what? It's just better if she's off somewhere. But, you know, like you said, maybe this is it. maybe she's gone now. Hopefully she's gone now, that this was just sort of a means to an end, with that end being, okay, we need to put Marvin in a very specific amount of danger so that there's a real threat around him moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm hoping that they're going to figure out what to do with Lulu, because he was such a great character last season. This season, it feels kind of like, he just killed Crown in this last episode, and this episode's kind of like, meh. Like, there's no real kind of anything that happened with Lulu. We came straight into this episode. He's hooking up with Ziza, and everything there is just kind of like, it's not that it didn't happen, but it was just like, oh, okay. And then these new guys show up and they're like, listen, Crown owes us for this. Crown's not around. You're his business partner. Now you owe us. And then she's just like, so are we going to get back to business, or like, whatever, screw you. I was just like, this character of Ziza is just not developed. They're just not really putting what I hoped for with this character. We saw her watch him like kill Crown. I thought this character was going to like be much deeper and sort of start moving into like, if any of you watch Snowfall, more of like a Jerome and Louis situation where they really know each other's business. And because of that, they're able to have a much deeper relationship because there's an understanding of every aspect of each other's life. And I kind of was wondering if she was going to turn into that after seeing that, but nope. Here we are. She is just the new love interest.
I had thought, kind of crazily so, but I had thought we were going to be into its power season. It's like, I saw you commit this crime. You're going to give me all Jukebox's material. I'm going to record it myself, or else. Like, I
didn't think that.
No, I thought it was a remote possibility, but I think in general, I expected there to be some sort of bigger stakes or fallout from this. Maybe it's just I've watched too many shows that do really despicable things, a la Breaking Bad, where I thought we were going to get a big scene of like, how do you dispose of Crown's body that is just in this recording studio? People are going to be coming in and out of this studio. We got to make sure it looks clean, looks sanitary. Also, about all this, Lulu, why are you hooking up with Ziza right in the middle of this studio? You just saw this past episode, people can come into the studio at any given moment. Clearly, this is literally get a room. It is going to be better for everyone.
Because it's power, and this is one of the things that they like to do in this universe. This whole episode was just stacked with that. I mean, everyone was hooking up with everyone. And now we have to talk about the most uncomfortable part of this whole episode, which is Kanan, who is underage, hooking up with an adult. And sometimes shows do like cover this topic. It's never comfortable for me to watch. I don't care if the adult is a man or a woman. It just doesn't matter. If the person that they're sleeping with is underage, there's nothing like sexy about this scene. Like, some people might disagree with me, but if somebody is a child, they can't give consent. So this whole scene was just like, I'm completely out on this storyline. I'm really glad that the daughter ended up coming in, going to Rock, and basically being like, I have something I need to tell you. Because if I had to watch that dynamic go on where an adult is doing that with a child for the rest of the season, it was going to be tough. It was going to be tough ride.
It was going to be, it was tough even in this episode itself. And I hope this is not something the show does, sweep under the rug, and they actually get into like some of the trauma that kind of comes with something like this. Like Kanan in the present day Power, he was very hardened. He was very emotionless in a lot of ways. He had a very difficult perspective on things. And I think sort of the manipulation that goes into a situation like this is it's just another sticking point in his head of how hard, how brutal this world is. This is not something that I think Kanan, in raising Kanan, the show is going to be able to really fully understand. I mean, we're talking here about a teenager who doesn't really get the idea of a power dynamic that's at play here, or, issues related to consent. He's a teenager. He's reckless. He doesn't understand a lot of these things. But I think, the 50 Cent Kanan down the road, he will. And it's an interesting thing because we never really got into that Kanan's head all that much. I really wonder what he thinks about this scene, so many years down the road.
Okay, let's talk about RAQ and everything that's going on here, because Burke is like a dog with a bone, like they said in this episode. She is not stopping. And this is another storyline that this season I've just been like, why? Like, why is she? I get that she's like, oh, a cop was shot. Okay, but like, if you're starting to piece together that the person that shot your partner might be his son, then it's time to be like, okay, I'm going to kind of back away from this now, because this isn't just someone shot a cop. This is a father and son dynamic and something else that's going on here. And this is your partner. It's such a strange story that I just haven't been able to buy into. It felt like they just didn't know what to do with Burke, and they just wanted sort of this RAQ was a CI back in the day, and she was underage. There's a lot of this underage sort of power dynamic with people, crossing the line in this particular show, because we have everything that just happened with Kanan and this adult woman. Now we've got everything that happened with RAQ when she was underage, and Howard, and these different sort of power dynamics. But Burke's whole thing, like, I don't understand the motivation, because if Howard is like, I'm not interested, leave it alone, you're my partner, cut it out, then like, what really is her motivation? She's not really protecting him from anything if this is his son.
I think I don't know. In my head, it's a lot of just I want to show that I'm right. I want to show that I'm good at this. She's incredibly stubborn. Like, that's sort of the thing that I've gotten out of Burke so far. And that's not to say that I'm enjoying this storyline, because I'm really not. To me, a lot of it just sort of feels like in the Power universe, every year they want to make sure that they can utter this mantra of no one is safe. They got to get rid of somebody. They're not going to get rid of Omar Epps at this point. Howard may be sick and he may have almost died last season, but I don't think.
But it's a miracle.
Yeah,
he's fine.
He's all better now, everybody. But it's like, Burke, not a character that as many people care about. You can get rid of her. You can give Howard a new partner. You can sort of fulfill that part of the promise. And in doing so, you kind of keep that sort of tension on the show. And I mean, we've seen on a number of other shows like Dexter, multiple seasons, like comes into my head of like somebody in Miami Metro is starting to catch on to the truth. They end up getting written out of the show. It's too predictable, probably because Dexter did it so many times that it became predictable.
Yeah, they really did, yeah. Way too many times. But yeah, it does feel like we're going to end up in a spot where Burke has to go. Like, she really does. She's dug in so deep that she's figured out that she's figured everything out. She was, telling her girlfriend at the house where she was just like, RAQ was a CI. She was underage. She was probably hooking up with Howard. Kanan's probably the son. And, her girlfriend's just like, man, you are just threading together things that are very loosely based, but she's just hitting it over and over again. Exactly right. Every single thing she's saying. But in the end, what does it matter? Like, what does it matter? What are you trying to actually accomplish? Is it, like you said, I just want to be right? And what do you get for that? Pat on the back? Like, good for you, thumbs up? Like, your partner's going to hate you, and then you're stuck working with him continuously.
Congratulations, Burke. You are both good at your job and also really bad at your job, because a big part of being good at your job is actually being able to be socially aware of the situation around you and understand the bigger picture, and you do not, which is why you're probably going to die. Yeah.
Okay, so who's going to kill her? Is it going to be Howard? Is he going to end up having to make that tough choice because of Kanan, that things are all going to kind of blow up? Is it going to be RAQ? I mean, she knows that everything is going on. I actually think it might be Howard. I'm gonna sit on that island and kind of be like, he is developing something with Kanan, and he really wants to. He had this brush with death. he's come out of it being like, I'm going to live every day to its fullest. I want a relationship with my son. And if Burke is really connecting the dots that much, Howard's going to be in trouble for a bunch of things. You know, he slept with the CI. She was underage. You know, his son shot him. There's a lot of secrets that he also has to protect.
Very compelling argument. I think now that you've made that argument, I think you're probably right. I had Rock in my head. And the main reason I had Rock, the only real reason I had Rock in my head was just that we've seen that Jukebox and Burke have somewhat of a relationship, and that if Jukebox found out that Rock killed Burke, I think in some way it could, I don't want to say turn Burke into a martyr in Jukebox's head, but I think it could add this other layer of tragedy, and it could be one of those things that sends Jukebox down that road where eventually she does become a cop. But, you know, that your theory is better. I'm just going to say that right now.
I think that story could have played out way better if this season they had more of that Burke and Jukebox relationship building. They started a little bit last season, very tiny at the beginning of the season, and then nothing. And I think if they had continued to build that, Jukebox would have really cared. But if Burke goes now, I just don't think it's going to affect Jukebox the way that it could have. Just another layer of tragedy in her very young life.
Let's spend just a second here close to the end talking about Symphony. And, you know, if he is gone for sure, what does that look like? And I'm about to make an extremely dated reference that I don't know how many people out there will know, but in Let's Make a Deal, you often had to make these choices between, like, what is behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. I feel like Symphony is really thinking a lot about, okay, what's behind each one of these doors if I stay, if I go, and eventually he decides to go down this road seemingly of, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to take this job, I'm going to start sort of this new life. He's probably going to be more safe because of that. I think eventually he probably would have gotten killed if he stayed in New York around Rock. But, you know, with Kanan, there's almost these different doors he could have walked down as well, where I think there's a very particular path. If Symphony sort of stays in his life, becomes this sort of father figure for him. We saw like little parts of that already, and he could have been a different influence. He could have been a different guy who showed him something different, but because Kanan presumably, I say that because we don't know if he's gone for sure, presumably loses Symphony at this point, he loses that sort of guided influence. And I just wonder, could his life have turned out differently? And there's a lot of moments on the show already where we can kind of ask that question.
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple of people on this show that it feels like Kanan could have opened another door that didn't have, you know, a donkey behind it, where he ended up going down this really tough road. Because, yeah, Symphony is one of those people who could have stayed as a more positive influence. I think Howard could have been a pretty positive influence. He's still around and he's trying to do what he can. The biggest issue is just Kanan's trust with his mom. That's the person who raised him. That's the person he's the closest with. That's the person who's bringing him down this path with her together. And I think, you know, the unfortunate thing is just Rock is sort of the center of a lot of his world. And once that trust gets broken, it's just going to push him down that path further. And if there's no Symphony there to maybe knock on that door and be like, hey man, I really need some help. Like, this is what's happened. And maybe he could have brought him another path. Maybe Howard could have. Whatever it is, he's not going to choose door number 1 or 3.
We're in a really fascinating spot now where there's a lot of big storylines that are set up. I think we're going to get some exciting stuff. Yeah,
especially now that Rock learned that it was Scrappy's mom who was the CI, which is what a lot of you had been saying. And, you know, we all kind of saw coming, which is fine and great, because it opens up this storyline now for Rock where she ended up killing this guy who was so dedicated to her since he was very young, 14 years old. He was there with her no matter what. She ended up getting this sort of little bits of information, wrong information from Howard. You know, he lied about going to his cousin's house. You know, that it was real loose information. And she ended up making a huge life-changing decision for herself, of course, for poor Scrappy. And now she's in this situation. When she heard that information where Howard was kind of like, by the way, I got that wrong. It was actually the mom. The look on her face was just like, oh my goodness, I really screwed that up. I didn't really do my due diligence on this. So when Howard kind of puts it in her head about Symphony to be kind of like, is he on the up and up? You're going to deal with that problem. You know, I got problems with Burke. You got problems, you know, deal with your house. She does that sort of drive up, pulls up the gun, and then rethinks it. And I'm really glad she did this time. And I think if the thing with Scrappy hadn't happened and played out the way that it had, we'd have a very different video right now. Symphony would be dead.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that probably is the thing that caused her to make that decision at the end of this, and I'm happy for that. Good for Symphony that he can be alive. I like Symphony as a character.
I think she can trust him.
I'm still mad about Scrap though. I'm not gonna lie. Why?
No, it was awful, and you know it really sucks that she made that decision, but it has opened up a different storyline and a bit of a different way of thinking for Rock.
Well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because we'll see if that different way of thinking for Rock lasts through the end of this season and what other sort of chaos we have coming our way. But hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching, for hanging out with us. We'll see you here next time.